So we have an 11 o'clock appointment from the RCMP at detachments. I guess we should go do with some introductions first. Start with our staff, or Jason. Scott Klassen, Deputy Reeve, Division 5.
Tom Laker, Division 4.
Go ahead.
Kevin Charles, I'm the detachment commander from Drum. Glenn Demon, detachment commander from Bicycle. Fire detachment commander for Strathmore, and I wish it was 17.
I'm Tyler Gutling, I'm the operations NCO.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any kind of presentation or forum or just open discussion or? Yes, please. I understand there was some provincial initiative, I guess, on rural policing. There was something I saw recently. No? On rural crime. Sorry, wrong words. There was something I read about rural crime, a different way it was going to be looked at. Yes.
Sorry, I thought I did speak. Yeah, just the commanding officer of K Division did have a discussion with the media in regards to rural crime, if that's what you're referring to.
Yes.
I know his direction is going with an intelligence-led policing and using, trying to focus on those prolific offenders and those individuals using crime reduction units, things of that nature to try to reduce the number of crimes that are being committed by a few number of people. Everybody else agree with that?
Yep. Pardon me. Questions from council, anybody? Areas. Quiet today. Is there anybody in, oh, sorry, go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank each of you for coming. I know you guys, your time is very valuable and we appreciate you coming. I hear a lot in Division 2 and I guess across our county, I know you guys do as well, about rural crime. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts of what we can take back to our division, to our residents, things that, I know that there's like some well-known things that they can do to reduce crime. Just wondering if there's anything else you would add to kind of the basics of, you know, lock up your things, don't leave your vehicle running or with keys in it, you know, like the obvious things. And then the other thing that I was wondering if it's feasible to do, and maybe while we're all together, it might be a good time to talk about it, is like a rural crime watch county-wide. And just the best way to implement that, given that we have so many detachments that we're working with. So just thoughts on that.
So kind of the response that we've been looking at in Gleason, because that's both the areas are covered by us. Our district-wide or a county-wide crime watch is an interesting idea, and that's something we haven't really looked at. What we've been trying to do is have localized crime watches for each interest group, so getting people together in a given area. So even for us, we have about 4 different areas that we're looking at getting people together. As far as a message to take back, in addition to what you were saying, which is good, which is so simple, but it's missed quite often, is locking your stuff up. Don't leave your keys in the vehicle. Almost all of the stolen vehicle files we deal with out of our detachment are via keys left in vehicles. They're almost never being hot-wired or stolen any other way. They're just finding vehicles that they can grab the keys, start them, and take off. So we're always dealing with it. The other thing specific to, we have such a big rural area, is we're trying to get people aware of where, first of all, which detachment they're a part of, because some people are unaware. They fall just within a certain detachment boundary. And there's sometimes a delay trying to figure out which detachment should be responding. So we've been encouraging rural people just to find out which, and they can do that through any of the detachments, find out which detachment area they're a part of, and then their GPS coordinates, which you can go into even Google Maps or Bing Maps and find out what your GPS coordinates, and if, when they're dispatching for a call and they're trying to get the officers to respond to a location, so they see a suspicious vehicle perhaps, and they're trying to get the officers to respond there, if they know their GPS coordinates, we can utilize the systems in the vehicles to go directly there. And what happens otherwise is they'll say, well, we're rural route, 433 or something like that. And the officers are trying to find that route and figure out which side, and they'll run into the river, and then they have to go around and try and find another way to get there. Whereas if they have GPS coordinates, they can, in the vehicle, they can see exactly where it is and figure out the fastest way to get there. So a lot of people aren't really technologically savvy, but it's a simple enough process to write down, find out from anybody, like one of their family members, what their GPS coordinates are, write it down next to the phone, and then you can give those coordinates to the officers when they respond. So that's another thing that we're trying to work with.
So that's the most efficient way. That's the most efficient way for an individual resident to get their address to dispatch is through the GPS coordinates versus like blue signs or that type of thing.
I think the
Just to
blue signs are
clarify.
good as well. I don't know which is the best system, but we found for us in particular, that the GPS coordinates are very effective for getting us there. So I can't speak for everybody, but we found it to be the most effective way to do it. And then the last thing is each of the groups that come forward, similar to what was being said earlier, is it's usually a very small number of people that are responsible for the property crime. So the problem is specific with property crime is people feel under siege, they feel overwhelmed, they feel like they're unsafe in their own homes, and it causes a lot of misgivings and a lot of anxiety on people's behalf. So we're trying to encourage people to understand that it's a very small group of people that are responsible for this property crime, and it's a manageable issue if we can find reasonable intelligence and come up with a plan to go after them. So that's what the RCMP as a whole is trying to do, is they're trying to bring in groups. That's what crime reduction initiatives are, is you bring in a group that will target specifically those people that are responsible for the property crime. And that's what we're already doing. It's just not a formalized process, but we'll find out between our detachments, we pool our information, we'll find out who are the individuals responsible, we come up with a response and go after them, but we're doing all of that within our own resources responding to calls. So this would actually bring in outside resources that is going to assist with that. So I think we're all quite excited about what these teams can do when they come in. But when you're talking to constituents, I think it's good to remind them that it's a small group of people, and if we can get as much information coming in as possible on identifying who they are, then we can coordinate a response to it. And then as well, communication seems to be very key with a lot of these groups. They feel like they have no information, they don't know what's going on. So we've been setting up email groups for each specific area, and we can send them reports just saying, like, if we have, we often get a suspect vehicle and we don't know whose vehicle it is, but we have a description or a picture of the vehicle. So I forward that out to those groups, and then they feel empowered because now they can help us look for these vehicles and help try and identify where these people are and turn that information back over to us. So that's just something else if you're looking for things to go back to people as to what we can be doing. That's about all I have.
Yeah, I'll just add the emergency locator signs are probably the most efficient way because they identify pretty accurately where that address can be found. We deal with 4 different counties for our detachments, so there's a lot of confusion, especially when they start mixing up some of the coordinates or the range roads, township roads, because for our detachment, a lot of if you reverse them, they're still within our detachment, but it takes us to the opposite area. That adds not only for confusion for us, but for EMS if they're responding to something. So we're a little bit more unique because we deal with 4 counties, not just one county. But the emergency signs or the blue signs, green signs, depending on which county it is, they're probably the most efficient way. Eventually, it doesn't tell us how to get there, but it tells us where we're going. That's important to educate the people that they need to be able to relay that information. Our area, we can't rely on the cell phone GPS, smartphone GPS. We're too far. Some of the areas to the south will accurately tell us where we're going, especially if it's a drop 911 call with cell phone. But everything north of pretty much Irricana, that way, we're out towards Highway 9 in Wheatland. It just comes a tower location and a needle in a haystack. So.
Is there any questions out from the crowd before I go?
Just had a question in regards to what you said about the residents need to determine which detachment location they're in. Is there a map that's available that shows detachment boundaries, or, because I'm not familiar with that, so, and where would people access that?
I'm sure we can make that available. So I don't know what the most effective way to get that out to people, if all the counselors, if they had a copy of it, or.
Well, is it something that we can post on our website, or is that, because if you guys send me a link to that, we can certainly post that on our website, and council can have that as well, so.
I'm sure that's something I can look into for you.
Okay, if you can let me know.
Actually, there is right on the RCMP website, it has the provincial map for all the detachment boundaries. Yep. It's, and then if it's right around the boundaries and whatnot, for the most part, anybody close or anything's gonna respond anyway, especially, I know we respond to stuff in Strathmore's area, Strathmore responds to stuff in our area, especially when it's right around that, because a lot of the areas, you have to go around to get access to the area, so.
Red Deer and Lacombe counties are funding their own members. Is that something that we need to look at, or how efficient is that?
Sorry, could you say they're doing which?
Funding their own RCMP members?
I think you're speaking to an enhanced policing position, and that's something that has to be discussed through OSB. That's something that if the county wishes to do that, then, you know, by all means, it can be explored through our operational strategies branch in Edmonton.
Yeah, we do have one in Rocky View County. Rocky View County actually has 3. They have one in Strathmore, one in Airdrie, and one in Cochrane. So we're quite familiar with the enhanced policing positions. I can say that basically that's supplementary to our regular establishment of members. And they pretty much dictate that is a position that they're paying for, and they say, you know, this is what we want that position doing. And I know in my office that that's what we have that member doing, is exactly what the county wants. They're paying for it. They're getting the service that they're looking for. So it is something that is available.
Strathmore, you guys are implementing a watch clerk. Has that been implemented? And if so, we have any results for it? Because we've been requested as a county to look at maybe purchasing a position.
Right. Right now, for the watch clerk system to work completely, we need 4. One for each watch. Right now, the town of Strathmore is funding for 2 positions. So they're not assigned to an individual watch. What they're doing is we have one watch clerk that's working the day shift and one watch clerk that is working the evenings. And yes, we have noticed a huge difference in it's getting the members out on the road. It's relieving them an awful lot of their administrative duties, those things that are tying them to the desk. Is it perfect? No, because what happens is the watch clerks are trying to do everything for everybody, and the workload is somewhat overwhelming, to be quite honest. We do need those other 2 positions for it to work properly. That way you'd have one watch clerk for each watch. They can focus on that individual watch, and they can make sure that they're doing all the administrative duties for that watch. Right now it's a little bit haphazard, but even with the 2 that we have seen a huge improvement on the ability of the members to get out of the office and to get on the road.
Okay, just to follow up. So as I understand it, a watch clerk is about a $60,000 a year position. And then what in an enhanced policing force, what is another officer into the area how much would that cost? Like, I'm just trying to figure out price difference.
Yep. Right now, the town of Strathmore is budgeting $65,000 per watch clerk, and that includes benefits. So what the watch, they've advised me that it's about $15,000 is the cost of benefits. So the actual pay salary, if you wish, for the watch clerk is right around the $50,000 mark, but when you're looking at benefits, that brings it up to the $65,000 mark. The city of Airdrie also just posted a position for a watch clerk. They're looking for additional watch clerks, and in their posting, they're at the they're at the 69.9. So I think maybe their benefits package might be a little bit more or something, but it's right in that area. When you're looking at the cost of a member, the cost of a member is $160,000 per year. So when you look at that, there's a number of watch clerks per member.
I don't understand. So, it's not, sorry. So they want us to fund a watch clerk in Strathmore, but we've got 3 other detachments here and Bizano as well. Would funding a watch clerk in Strathmore alleviate anything from the east or the north? No. So how can we pay for a watch clerk here and not in Gleason, which is twice as busy, more than twice as busy, or Bicycle that covers something into Rockview? I mean, it's just, I think you have to look at the bigger picture and not just one detachment.
I would suggest that, well, Strathmore is we are the largest detachment out of this area, and we do have the largest file count. And we are also 24/7, 365. We're doing an awful lot. You're right, we patrol a smaller portion of Wheatland County than perhaps some of the other detachments do. But the areas that we do cover, we do see a very high file load. And it's just coming down to, if we don't fund some of these positions, we are looking at very, very likely having to reduce service levels.
Sorry, just for clarification, do any of the other detachments within here have watch clerks currently? It's just the Strathmore one.
None of them, I don't believe, correct me if you're wrong, but none of them are working on a watch system. We're the only one that is large enough to work on a watch system.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody else? Alan?
So a question to Gleason, I guess, and first off, and then maybe Drumheller as well, and Bicycle. Is there a need in your detachments for more clerical support to be able to get the members out on the road more? Would that be beneficial or
not? Speaking for Gleason, I can say absolutely. The more support staff there is, then the more duties you can remove from members. So we have right now where support staff will say, we're asking to do something, and they'll just say, we're saturated, we can't do anything more. So then we have policing often is absolutes, like this has to be done. So then we're putting those duties on to the members to say, well, you need to do this portion of these, disclosure packages, that we can't put this on the support staff, they don't have any more capacity. So any additional people would alleviate some of that, which allows greater operational flexibility from the members. As far as beyond that, that's probably a conversation that we'd have to look at more in depth to see exactly how an additional position would be used and what their duties would entail and so on and so forth. We'd have to look into it a little further, but the simple answer is yes, absolutely. I don't think, speaking for ourselves, there would be a benefit to it.
So with respect to Bicycle, we're sort of, Bassano, I think, is in the same position as us. They have a single support staff for the detachment. Our support staff's fully tasked to where even the members are responsible for doing their own court packages and everything. We get very little because they're just so focused and overwhelmed with dealing with all the other stuff. So we're a little bit different, but the number of occurrences that we deal with respect to Wheatland County are actually quite minimal. We don't have any of our communities are within Wheatland County, so it's primarily some rural residents, primarily the most of our break and enters and our rural crime that we deal with, it tends to be well site related. We respond to a lot. A lot of it is right on the border with Strathmore. Excuse me. So that tends to be the focus on the type of matters the odd home break and enter. Up until the end of September, we had one stolen vehicle in our little corner that we police. And that was just south of Highway 9 out by the 9 and 21. So whereas I know farther south, when you start getting closer to Strathmore, the numbers, or along the Country Hills corridor, that highway, the numbers jump up quite significantly. So
For Drumheller, we have 3 clerks right now. We have 1 public service employee on the provincial side. She is the supervisor. And then we have 2 municipal employees. Their workload is such that I've put forward a business case to the town of Drumheller requesting a 3rd municipal employee position, and that is currently being reviewed. They have expressed an interest in examining. I haven't been turned down flatly. So they are looking at that for me.
That brings to mind, just one other thing to add is, the thing to bear in mind with Gleason is that something like 88% of our call volume is Siksika Nation. So I think there would have to be, in all fairness to the people in this room, there would have to be a conversation with Siksika about what portion of any position would fall on them, because I don't think it would be fair to say that the entirety of it should fall on Wheatland. Yeah, that's just a number off the top of my head. I'd have to double check, but it's something like, the last time I ran numbers, something like that. 12% of our calls are outside, or 80% of our calls have some sort of relation to Siksika. Either it's on the nation or it's involving nation members.
Just a question at Drumheller. You mentioned there was a municipal employee versus a watch clerk. What's the difference?
The difference is a watch clerk is a clerk assigned to a watch. As Kevin mentioned, for the larger detachments, they can actually run watches. So it's the same group of members working together all the time, and they'll work, a couple days, couple nights, and days off. The opposite watch will work, and so forth. Usually it's about 4 watches, depending on how the shifts are run. So you'll have a dedicated clerk that works with and for that watch. Whereas in Drumheller, our clerks work days, and we don't have a watch system just because we don't have that enough positions to run like a watch. We have 15 members, so the clerks kind of share the workload for all members. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was just wondering too, with the workload, this is something that I've always thought about, but with the workload shifting, how you're saying, and more of the paperwork, how come federal doesn't step in and provide some of this funding? I mean, they're changing the job and how the court systems work and what you need to go to court and understand all the paperwork and the dot side, or everything done properly, but it seems like it's downloaded onto us. But just wondering what your opinion on that is.
Unfortunately, a lot of the provincial policing aspect is coming back to the counties, and I know that it's very much a the PPSA dollars, the provincial dollars versus county dollars, and who's the one that's looking after that. When we look at support staff, our support staff, we're getting one support staff on the provincial side for every 3 members. So in our case, I have 3 provincial assets on the public service side.
For bicycle detachment, they use that same formula. However, you don't get that second support staff until you get number 6. So that's why I'm saying, like, we're at the top end of that single support person, but we don't meet the criteria or their formula for justifying that second position. So, and that's just the way they work it. Even a half position for us, would probably alleviate hugely the pressures on that single support staff, especially with the fact that administratively there's a lot more functionality or a lot more stuff being downloaded or expected administratively. We deal with court in Airdrie, so our court is weekly, so it places a different burden on us to have stuff put before the court, where when we used to be dealing with Drumheller Court, you only dealt with it the once or twice a month that Drumheller held court. A lot more manageable, a lot easier to schedule or plan stuff. That's something that maybe in the future we have to consider going back to, is maybe going back to Drumheller, just to make it more manageable, not only for us, but
Watch clerk talking force, we need to, in a perfect world, we need 2 more. So how do you how would you, how do you envision this? One coming from the county of Wheatland, one coming from Rocky View County? How's this working?
In a perfect world, that's how I would see it, because we want to be good neighbors, and we want to work with each other. The town of Strathmore, I think they're paying for 2 of them. They're seeing that, they are the, if you want, it's funny because it's almost a 50-50 split as far as our volume of calls in the counties versus in the town of Strathmore. And yet the town of Strathmore is providing a number of members in addition to what the province is providing for the counties. And they're also providing a much greater support on the administrative side. We have 5 staff or municipal staff that are being provided by the town of Strathmore for the administrative side. So, and when you look at the call volume, the town of Strathmore is only 53% of the call volume. The remainder of the call volume is in the 2 counties. So it's almost a complete 50-50% split. So looking at being good neighbors, we're working in those 2 counties, and those 2 counties are taking up almost 50% of the call volume. I see it as being something that we could work with, and saying that we're all being good partners, we're all being good neighbors, by having Rocky View provide 1, Wheatland County providing 1, Strathmore providing 2, and then that gives, that does give us the resources that we need, that we can run a full watch clerk system and get the members on the road.
Do you have a statistic between the 2 counties, between Rocky View and Wheatland County, for the, but like how much is Rocky View and how much is Wheatland County out of that 47%?
Yep, Wheatland County actually accounts for 38% of the call volume, and the remainder is in Rocky View County. But when you look at it, it is for Wheatland. 38% of the 47. Okay. 62% would be within Rocky View County, and 38% is in Wheatland County.
I see there's other communities here. Any of the representatives want to ask any questions of the RCMP?
Well, I guess.
You have to come up to the podium if you do, and you turn the mic on. You're here.
Morning. Thanks for the invitation.
Turn your mic on.
This one. You can hear me now? Yes. All right. Thanks for the invite to Wheatland County Council, and for you folks being here today with us. I'm Darcy Burke. I'm mayor for the village of Rocky Ford, and we did hear a presentation from Strathmore Detachment and the town of Strathmore about the watch clerk system. And at a regional partnership meeting, when we did discuss it, the concerns came from the east side of Wheatland counties. If we do fund this and we put the watch clerk system in Strathmore, what benefit do we see on the east side of Wheatland County? We all share in rural crime. We see the increase there and what have you. And, you know, we understand it is a partnership and being good neighbors, but still, if we're going to invest our taxpayer money, we need to ensure that we see some sort of something come from that. We do not see regular patrols in Rocky Ford. I mean, you've told us that it's a 911 call base type thing. It's the only time. And if the presentation, or if the presence of the police force is a deterrent, well, we need to get them out in the rural areas. And so if we're going to curb the crime around the Rocky Ford area, well, we've got to see the police out there, but we can't fund a watch clerk if we're going to see it go to the west side of the county. That's my concerns. And it's not that our community does not support or is not in support of this system. We just need to see some sort of value if we're going to invest money in it. That's my comment. And as long as we all sit here as partners and we come up with some sort of strategy, because rural crime in this area has increased significantly. I mean, it's brutal. And we collectively, I mean, we're elected officials here, and I mean, whatever we can do in order to get more police out there. I don't know if it means we increase Wheatland County peace officers, so there's more presence. I know they're limited in the scope of the work they can do, but maybe it's just the presence of them being out there. Is that a more cost-effective thing? I have no idea, but we have to open up the conversation so we can figure this out collectively as a group. That's all I've got to say. And thank you for your time here.
Thanks, Darcy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alan Larson. I'm the mayor of the Village of Standard. And off the top, I just want to reiterate some of Darcy's suggestions and comments regarding policing in the eastern part of the county. What it comes down to is bang for our buck. You know, and I know as RCMP members, you guys are interested in that too. You've got to utilize your equipment and personnel to the maximum of your abilities as well. And we want to see that happening out in our area so we can try and curb the direction on which crime is going out there. And, you know, it may not be, like, I'm all for doing a watch officer again, or, you know, that type of thing. But it may be our detachments working together better. You know, I don't know. I don't know where we go in that direction. I know that being from Standard, we've had calls before. We're in the Strathmore area. And we've had calls before that have been transferred to other detachments because of availability, and I understand that completely. You know, we can't be everywhere at once. That's all there is to it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any crime at all. But it's a matter of working with our partners out there and maybe getting a system in place, not only with the watch system. I believe the watch system would work as long as we can guarantee to our residents that we're paying their tax dollar for a reason. You know, as long as we're spending our dollar wisely and we're getting something for it, I have no problem with that whatsoever. But I would like to see a system where the residents and councils themselves know exactly what happens when myself as a resident phone into the Strathmore detachment and the officers on duty are on the west end of the area. And it would make more sense to have Drumheller, Gleason, or Bazzano even show up at the area and have communication in that respect. So I'd like to see things move in two directions, you know, coverage or even bicycle if it's over toward the Rocky Ford area, you know. We've had instances before where it seems like our detachments don't want, or I shouldn't say don't want to, but haven't been able to work together to make things happen for us in the past, and I'd like to see that move forward. So just a couple of comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan.
Well, I can speak with respect to our detachment in Isaac, because of the size of our detachment and the geography and how we're spread out, and any given time there always seems to be something going on in the north or a different area at the same time, there's something going on involving two different groups. We have good communication with Drumheller, with Three Hills to our north. Didsbury actually, probably less so because it's a smaller area where we overlap. Airdrie and Strathmore, there's quite often we'll either back them up or assist them or attend a call, especially if it's going to be more efficient for us to attend because they're occupied with something and vice versa. And I know even we've gone out to Carbon, things like that, if or Drumheller's occupied on something to the east side of their detachment area, and they'll contact us. Can we free up a member, or can we send somebody out to deal with that matter? So the communication's there, and the members are encouraged to communicate that if they can't get to something, assess what's going to be more efficient. Good example of that probably would have been the snowstorm back at the beginning of November. Strathmore called for us to try to get into it from the north end. Unfortunately, we couldn't make it down beyond the hill just before 564, but whichever the highway was there. So we couldn't access that area. And then by the time we got back out and tried to get back out to the highway, Drumheller had that issue with not only there, but Hannah, or out towards Hannah. Like, it was just a mess everywhere. But their communication was good. So, we had members from different detachments all over the place. I think even Three Hills ended up coming down because they weren't impacted by the event or the weather event like the rest of us were. So there is some communication and cooperation going on. But it's done at the local level. It doesn't seem to be done at the dispatch level.
Yeah, I can second that, and I know that with us, with Gleason, or with Chestermere, or with Bicycle or Drum, we're often on the radio, asking them, they're asking us for assistance, or we're asking them for assistance, or vice versa. There's times we're out in Gleason and something's happening in Rocky View, and we've asked Chestermere to attend it for us because we're out in Gleason. And Chestermere has gone and handled it for us. So we are communicating like that all the time. You have to realize too, even if you look at Strathmore, when you're looking at the rural area of Strathmore, we're looking at 600 square miles and 25,000 people. That's an awful lot of area to cover and an awful lot of people to try to help out. And I have extremely minimal resources to do that. I'm very much concerned on depending on what kind of assistance we either get from the province or from the counties as to how that's going to affect Strathmore, the town of Strathmore, and how they direct us. I'm hoping that we can stay on a post system because if we can't, we're in trouble. That's all I can say. We're in serious trouble.
Sorry, just to clarify, you mentioned Chestermere there. We were under the understanding that Chestermere detachment was a standalone. So do they do help if you call?
They do. They are a standalone, and they have directions from their town that they're not to leave the town of Strathmore or town of Chestermere, sorry. And they don't, except for when we are in a bind and we call them, they are there. They help us out.
Okay. The same, so.
Yeah, Airdrie is, I know that they're the same. They have a rural component as well, but they're also in the direction that they stay in town, but they've gone away from the post system. We will flounder if we go away from the post system.
Can you explain what the post system is?
The post system is, we have, the municipality is paying for so many members, the province is paying for so many members. Depending on the type of call, let's say it's a 2-member response call in the county, and we only have one, somebody from the town goes and backs them up or responds with them. So now you have municipal resources that are going into the county to help deal with whatever's happening in the county. Vice versa, if there's something major that's happening in the town, you'll have a rural member that is assisting the members in town. So what's happening is the boundary is kind of gray. Depending on what the type of call is and where we have the bodies, we will send bodies. So what the town of Strathmore may be paying for them, and they're out in Standard. You know, they're at the, you know, fatality collision on 564. It won't necessarily be rural members. It could be there's no rural members there because they could be dealing with something in Rocky View County. So the municipal members have gone out and they're dealing with that call. So that's the post system. When we go away from the post system and they're strictly municipal or strictly rural, that means the municipal members will not leave the town and the rural members stay out in the county and they do not assist in the town. And when we look at the numbers of bodies that we have for municipal versus rural, won't be. Well, I have to be careful because of safety concerns for members. But I can tell you that I have 8 rural members responding to calls. So if you do the math, divide that by 4. That's for 25,000 people and 600 square miles.
So when you have these standalone attachments versus, and the post system, who makes that call? Is that a provincial?
The municipality can say,
So they could do it?
they could tell me tomorrow that
And we have no say in it as a county?
they're the ones
saying-
paying the bill.
So then we're forced with having to build a new detachment for members that we don't have a house for? Is that fair to say, or?
The building that we're in right now is a provincial building.
Okay. Would they be able to operate out of that building still? Like,
Yes, they can operate,
Okay.
they can operate out of that building. It's just that now they're only going to have 3 public service employees, support staff, because those are paid for by the rural, and then those members for the rural, and that's it.
So how many police officers would you have to have? To run a rural division, a standalone rural division? Like 8 isn't enough, because I know the math on, but in order to have regular policing on, you know, where you have, you know, 2 members on all the time, how many members would you need?
Well, I do have 2 members on all the time.
Right, but.
Right now, with the 4-watch system, I have 2 members, 2 rural members on all the time, unless one of them is away on holidays or one of them is sick.
But if the town of Strathmore becomes a standalone, and then you've got 8 members, you cannot run a complete shift.
I would not be able to provide 24-hour coverage, no.
Okay, so to provide 24-hour coverage, how many?
About 14 members?
Yeah, about 14
Okay,
members,
thank you.
at $160,000 each.
Minimum.
Yeah, and that's really minimum. If you look at how the city police forces, and you have to appreciate that, you know, K Division would have to come up with their determination as to what they are for policing models. But if you look at the city of Edmonton, they do 1 police officer for every 1,000 people. The city of Calgary does 1 police officer for every 800. We have 25,000 that we're policing with 8.
Just to add on, Drumheller, we have 2 contracts as well, one with the town of Drumheller and one with the province of Alberta to provide policing services, and we too run a post concept. My opinion, it's very effective. I've last fall I met with all my elected officials in different areas and explained it to them, and they're all fully supportive. It's a very effective model of policing.
So is the trend as these municipalities get bigger, so like Strathmore, Chestermere, is the trend for them to go on their own system regardless? Or
It's
is
to do with population of a community. Once you're over 5,000, you're responsible for your own policing and your own funding and all that, right? So Chestermere, the town of Chestermere itself is a standalone. They have a policing contract with the RCMP, and the RCMP will be your police service for the town of Chestermere. And the rural area is done by Strathmore.
And that funding model changes. Anything over 5,000, it's a 70-30 split, and over 15,000, it's a 90-10 split. Strathmore just passed 14,000 people. So they're very soon going to the 90-10 split. So that's where the pressure comes on them.
Well, it makes more sense to share services, obviously, and to, especially when you have clerks that you need to cover different things, right? So.
Well, and that's why we want to remain on the post system. It offers the better backup for the members. It offers the better services for the communities, the counties. It allows us to draw the membership where they need to go. So if they need to go to Standard, they go to Standard. If they need to go to Langdon, they go to Langdon. If they need to be in Strathmore, they're in Strathmore. I don't want to add those restrictions, and so I'm really pushing back and saying we need to remain on the post system.
But irregardless, if we do fund, like at some point in the future, and if the town council decides that they want to go on their own standalone, it's their decision to make.
It is.
So, okay, just for clarification.
When is the town, or the hamlet of Langdon? They must be 5,000 people now.
They passed 5,000 people 2 years ago. And so they have to institute a policing solution. I believe it's by April of 2018, but then there's 2 additional years to implement. So they don't actually have to implement a solution till 2020.
And just for a little clarity, because Gleason places Siksika, we have a similar agreement, but it's somewhat different. We have a tripartite agreement where Aboriginal policing pays for 4 positions in the Gleason detachment. And it works very similar to what Kevin's describing as the post system, where we're accountable to Aboriginal policing to ensure that those 4 positions are creating value for Siksika, but there's still that ability that we are allowed, those members can be pulled to go deal with a serious incident like the October, when we're talking about the snowstorm. It's all, the fires, it's all hands on deck. Everybody's responding to wherever they're needed most at any given time, and that is really the only effective policing model. If we had 4 tripartite agreement members sitting in Gleason detachment unable to respond and assist with the accidents happening on Highway 1, it just becomes very, very inefficient. So I think that's clear that universally we all believe in the post system, and it's definitely provides the most effective policing model. So hopefully it's not something that any of us have to look at going away from.
And just one more question for me. The watch clerk, does that have to be on the physical location of the office, or could it be a remote location like a dispatch kind of thing where someone could upload the information to them if it's filing, that kind of thing?
Normally they work with the watch.
Okay.
They're on the radio, they're on the phone. So what they're doing is when the members are responding to calls, they're doing an awful lot of the background work. Like they'll be doing address checks, they'll be doing persons checks of the people that are in the residence, so that the member, while they're driving to the complaint, they're getting information that's being fed to them by the watch clerk on the radio or either on their computer screen. So they're already getting that heads up information as they're on the way. Then what happens is when they're at the scene and they're dealing with it, the watch clerk is then also linking all of the information into the computer system so that the member can deal with what they have to. They don't have to deal with any of the administrative portion of the file. They can update the details of the event. And then the watch clerk can do everything else on the file so that the member then can go from that complaint directly to another complaint without having to come back to the office, write it all up, spend an hour or 2 hours in the office writing it up. They just go directly to the next complaint.
Fair enough. Oh, the red button up front.
There we go. Just one more further comment regarding the watch clerk system. I think a lot of us councillors, both county and municipalities, were in Rocky Ford here for a Wheatland regional meeting, in which Strathmore councillors were present as well. And I don't know what about the rest of you, but I got the impression that if the county of Wheatland and the 3 municipalities did not buy into the watch clerk system, Strathmore was considering going a standalone. So we have to consider that, right? You know, that's the major consideration right there for our detachment in Strathmore. And then I think from that point on, we branch it out to the other detachments in the other areas that cover parts of Wheatland County. And I'm suggesting that we have a meeting once again between 5 municipalities and figure this thing out and get it done sooner than later. So that's, I think if we have to come up with a solution one way or the other, or we're going to lose a valuable partner in the town of Strathmore.
Just a quick comment on the watch clerk. Drumheller Detachment would not take any offense if Strathmore were to get the watch clerk position there, nor do I expect to see any benefit from it. I fully concur that just due to the location, geographic location, calls for service, the volume, that again, it would go to Strathmore, and no expectation for Drumheller to see any benefit.
Okay, thank you. I know that was a concern from some of our councillors, was making sure it was fair across the board, because we have other detachments as part of it. Any other questions?
2 questions, and it's not related to the watch clerk. When I occasionally get calls from residents that are complaining about rural crime. The first question I ask them is, have you reported it to the RCMP? About half the time they say no. So the first thing I say is you need to report it. I just would like to clarify that that's appropriate. The rationale that I give them is that even if you can't necessarily respond or it's minor or whatever, it helps you with your statistics. Is that accurate? Okay. Then the next thing is, how do I help them deal with the frustration that they've made a call and they haven't seen a response? As detachment commanders, do you want that reported to you, or is that just something that I should be letting kind of constituents know? If it's minor, you guys might not be able to respond to it, or a member might not actually attend, but it's good for you still to have that information.
It is worth having that information. We may not be in a position to respond to it depending on what the level of the crime is. But what happens is then we can start looking at, are we having a trend in one specific area? And that's where our ICRU, or our intelligence-led crime reduction unit, comes into play, because what happens is they start grabbing those stats and they start saying, okay, we're having this type of crime in this area and we're getting a high number of it. So who are the people that we believe are doing that? So we may not respond to that one individual crime, but what happens is when you look at the whole, it now starts to come together and we can start to target that and maybe find the perpetrators that are involved in it. Because we know that with our prolific offenders, there are a small group of people that are doing the majority of the crimes, and they're doing the majority of what type of crime. So if you say, well, I only have one incident in this area, well, actually you had 10. If we only know about the one, it's not a trend. If we have 10, now we have a trend and we have a concern in that area, and so that's where we want to focus our resources. So it's very important for them to let us know. Even though we may not come to see them, we will talk to them, we will record it, and eventually, like I said, it may be cumulative and enough that we're able to do something with it.
I'll just add to that a little bit. They should never be ignored completely. Officers may not be in a position to respond, but there should be some sort of communication with them. So if you run across somebody, speaking for Gleason, and I think I can speak for everyone, if you run across someone that says they call something in and they never crickets, they never heard anything from anybody, then in my position as the ops NCO, I want to know about that, and I can follow up and make sure that people should be at least receiving a phone call so they know what's happening. And to further what Kevin said, I can give you an example of when I was working somewhere else. My father called me, lives in rural Saskatchewan, and he said he'd had bicycles stolen off of the house, and he was upset that the officers never came to his house. And I explained, well, like, they have to prioritize. There's a lot of things going on. They have to decide that. And he said, oh, okay. And then 2 weeks later, I find out that the church that he's a part of, all of the windows got smashed. And he told them, no, my son said don't call in about stuff like that. So I said, no, you're missing the point entirely. Call in everything, but have a reasonable expectation that the officers may not be able to respond. But I told him in that incident, how do you know they didn't arrest somebody last night breaking windows in the community, and they just don't know that your building is one of the buildings that got damaged? If you don't call in, they can't do anything about it. So I don't know if that makes clarify, but it's the same point Kevin's making.
And in addition to that, when we're assessing, how we're going to expend or use our resources, especially to target stuff that's going on. We went through a period of that with, in specific with the village of, or the town of Irricana. You know, they would throw stuff on Facebook and everything else and talk like everybody else. But for whatever reason, they weren't calling us. And it's really hard for me as a detachment commander to justify moving resources, changing shift schedules around, maybe paying some overtime if I don't have something to back that up or to justify that, because I'm accountable to somebody else as well. So if something happens, any crime at all, it's important to report it. Yes, you might not have somebody attend for that, but just the fact that something happened is important for us to know, to be able to do an analysis or assess what's going on in the community. Don't assume it's not related. We get that all the time with stuff, Strathmore, in the Keoma area, especially when people are traveling along that. And a lot of guys go, oh, well, we didn't want to report it. We didn't want to bother you. And that's a typical rural mentality. Well, we know you're busy, so we're not going to call you. Well, we're paid to be busy and called, with the understanding that we'll communicate with them, because that information might be the key to what we're looking at. But if you don't share that with us until 3 or 4 days after or weeks after, that might have been the piece of the puzzle. So,
Just to further on Facebook, we've had it where they've reported it on Facebook but never called us. And we have seen it where the community's gotten into an uproar over a supposed crime that's on Facebook. And so then we find out about it, we go investigate it, and we actually find out that it was false. It was not, it did not happen. It was not a crime. But now we have a whole town that is panicking and in an uproar as to what was on Facebook or on, there's pages that they have for the towns that are on Facebook. And it's amazing how it can, you know, get a whole group of people into a panic, and it never happened. And so now we're trying to quell those fears and to go out and say to the people, no, this was false. It did not happen the way it was reported. And so please look at Facebook with a grain of salt, and, you know, call your police and let them investigate it.
I really appreciate all those comments, and it's good to have that confirmation that I'm giving the right message to our constituents. I wonder if there's a way for us to work together on an initiative to get that message out, because it is a really common, like I hear it commonly, that they don't want to bother you, or, you know, some people are realistic in knowing the scope of, like, they know you can't come out and fingerprint every time a car gets stolen, or, you know, like, but some people have unrealistic expectations and some people have realistic expectations. But I think we need to work on getting the message out that every incident should be reported. And it's good to know that people should at least expect a phone call as a follow-up, because I have heard some people that don't get any follow-up. And I've said, like, contact a supervisor, because they may, like, you should, in my mind, you should at the very least get a phone call back. So it's good to hear that that's accurate. And I'm just wondering how we communicate that to people on a broader, rather than just each time they're calling.
I mean, the media is a great way to get a lot of this out. I know we do put out Crime Stoppers tips all the time, but the media is a great resource, and so I think pushing that message through the media is something that we could look at.
I've had this conversation in my previous meetings with my elected officials in the other counties and villages and towns, and basically my message to them was to make sure that you report all crime and report all suspicious behavior as well. If there's a vehicle skulking down the road in the middle of the night with the lights off, call that in, you know, call the police. So we've seen an increase in reports of suspicious vehicles in our jurisdiction, which I'm quite pleased about. One thing that the elected officials stated is that a lot of them, some of these villages have either a Facebook or a monthly newsletter, and they were going to put a blurb in there saying, you know, the police remind you to report all crimes, no matter how trivial you may think it is. It's important that the police have an opportunity to know where these crimes are occurring. And again, as Kevin said, media is fantastic. have a good rapport with our local media, and once in a while there'll be a blurb there as a reminder, report all crime to police.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to bring it back to the watch clerk and the standalone detachments. So 65,000 for each watch clerk. So and you guys want 4, so that'll be 260,000. Yeah, but 4 altogether is going to be your total payout will be 260,000, and then of your guys' calls, it was 46% or 47%. Sorry, was into the 2 counties.
47% of the calls
Yeah.
are in the counties. No, you have to be, 65,000 would, like if you're looking at what would be the share for Wheatland County, the share for Wheatland County would be 65,000. The share for Rocky View County would be 65,000. The share for Strathmore, of course, is double that. So it's the twice.
That's what I'm getting at, though. And of that 47%, it was 38% was in Wheatland.
Yes, that's correct.
So that the total calls in Wheatland would be 17.8% of the total calls.
Oh, for the entire
So
detachment. Okay.
We're still overpaying if we pay for a full watch clerk. Because 17.8% of the 260 grand would be 46,280. So we're still overpaying by 20,000 at least.
I'm just looking at it as like I said, being the good neighbor. Strathmore paying for 2, and Rocky View paying for 1, and Wheatland paying for 1. And that way we maintain the 4. We're good neighbors towards each other, and we're trying to get the police out there to provide the service that we need to.
Oh, I fully agree with being good neighbors. I just don't believe that we should be subsidized or we should subsidize somebody else. I'm more than happy to pay the fair share, but I think we have to figure out that fair share.
That being said, Jason, too, the rates will go up and down over the years, right? We may have more one year than Strathmore does, or, that's just a snapshot, so. Yeah, and the way it's funded, I mean, there has been no per capita funding or anything like that. I mean, there's different ways of looking at it. That's for us to discuss, I think, with Strathmore. But that, and Rocky View as well, yes. So with that being said, I thank you guys for coming. If there's any other questions for anybody else. And I do want to thank you for your service. We all are all working together to make communities safer and keep everybody happy. So thank you very much.
I make a motion to accept it as information.
Thank you. All in favor? Make a motion for lunch. Adjourn for lunch. Back at 1. We have an appointment for 1 o'clock from Sensican, agenda item 3.3B. And I understand there's a presentation. Just microphone, introduce yourself.
Sorry, yep. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Theo Moran, and I am the president and CEO of Sensican. And we ready to go when you are? Okay, excellent.
Very good. Yeah.
As you may know, Sensican is a medical cannabis cultivator looking to establish itself in the wonderful Wheatland County. And we'd like to, first of all, thank the council and planning committee for setting this up and allowing us to present here today. By the end of this presentation, we hope to illustrate who we are as a company, what we're here for, some of the steps that have been taken to date, as well as hopefully receive some guidance from the council moving forward. To start out with, who is Sensican? So we are a socially and eco-friendly cannabis cultivator with a passion for alternative medications. We're a group of trusted Albertans, all with various expertise who care to improve the lives of others. And we're all looking to add to Wheatland County's long and proud agricultural history and add new opportunities to the agribusiness. We're currently underway with our application under the ACMPR, which is the Access to Cannabis for Medical Purposes Regulation. We are now in the security clearance stage with the federal government, meaning we're approximately 2 months away from receiving our letter to build. Our core values include integrity, community, quality, and sustainability. And we hope to lead with that, starting with the community and being as transparent as possible as a company, moving forward right from the development planning process. Our purpose here is a proposal to amend the Land Use Bylaw 2016-01 to allow for medical cannabis facilities to be allowed outside of the west of Highway 1 structure plan and down in the industrial sector of Range Road 270 and Township Road 221. So some steps that have been taken to date. I see a lot of new faces in the council, and congratulations on the recent elections there. It's very exciting. Some of you may recognize me, or a couple of you, from December of 2016. I had come and presented and spoke at the council meeting, during which time the land use bylaw was being amended at that time. And to be completely transparent, we were in very preliminary stages and under the assumption that speaking at that council meeting would entail us to be considered for direct control under the advisory of two previous council members at the time. However, we're here to start fresh and anew and are far better positioned and well structured at this point in time. So following that, we started off and we had ourselves a development planning committee meeting in June there, and just to get some initial preliminary steps on how to proceed and move forward. We had been working closely with Health Canada with our application process and the logistics of that, and through that we learned on November 28th that there may be an additional area structure plan being put together in the Goldfinch area, which is the industrial sector down on Range Road, or Township Road 221, sorry, and Highway 24. So we are right on the northern tip of that new potential area structure plan, and we are questionable whether or not we will be included inside of that. Another reason why we're here today to amend the land use bylaw, as we're unsure of whether or not we'll be included in that. However, at that meeting, we were able to engage with ISL Engineering, who was commissioned to create that area structure plan. And in speaking with them, understanding basically the us being may or may not be included in that. However, we also had the opportunity to engage with a lot of the community members and some of the local businesses and discuss our intentions and raise any questions or concerns that the community may have in regards to this type of facility in the area. We were very well received at that time, and even had a chance to set up some potential synergies with some local businesses moving forward from there. So very well received, and we're very grateful for that. On December 4th, we had a secondary development planning meeting, and from there we understood that the appropriate steps to take would be to come and amend the land use bylaw, and hence why we're here today. We also did some proactive community outreach in December, so we did some door knocking around our surrounding neighboring communities there, and went and discussed with our neighbors, same idea as we did at the area structure plan meeting. However, we set up some trifold pamphlets here, in which I'll hand out to you after this presentation here. But handed these out to the community, and basically stating who we are as a company, our values, and a lot of the questions and concerns that are raised on Health Canada's website, and for them to voice any concerns that they might have with this type of establishment in the area. And once again, very well received. We got invited into a lot of their homes and learned a lot about the community around us, so we're very happy about that. As well as even had some inquiries about potential employment in the near future. So good to hear that the stigma surrounding medicinal cannabis is dissipating, and people are realizing the benefits of this incredible plant. As far as completed studies, we've done a wetland and biophysical impact assessment study, and basically to ensure that we would not be encroaching on any of the existing wildlife or wetlands present. That was conducted through Great Bear Engineering, and it was noted through that that we would be completely avoiding any of the existing wetlands present right now, which is great. And further to that, we've had some preliminary conversations with Ducks Unlimited Conservation Company in order to preserve the existing wetlands on that piece of property right now and create somewhat of a wildlife sanctuary on that area, as we are eco-friendly, and we do want to reduce as much of our footprint as possible. Where we do want to make a large impact is with medicinal cannabis treatments. Up here you'll see just a short list of the various ailments that can be treated with medicinal cannabis. Medicinal cannabis has been around for over 2,000 years in ancient medicines, has been legal in Canada since 2001, and is making huge waves in the industry as of lately. I myself, being a success story of medicinal cannabis, I had a life-changing experience 4 years ago in which I was struck head-on by a drunk driver, breaking my C6 and 7 vertebrae in my neck, nearly paralyzing me from the neck down. And through that, I was prescribed opioids through the hospital, morphine and oxycodone. And I chose, following the hospital treatment there, not to go ahead with the treatment of that, and chose to get my medicinal marijuana license. And through that, discovered what's called CBD, a cannabinoid that's a non-euphoric part of the cannabis plant, and that helped with inflammation, swelling, and the healing process, as well as the pain, obviously. That was one of the main reasons that I'm so passionate about this industry right now, and one of the main reasons that I'm in this business is the discoveries and the future research and development of this plant. So that's one thing we're going to be heavily focused on, working closely with research physicians to ensure that we're tailoring specific strains to all the listed ailments above and more. We'll not only be growing the plants themselves, we'll also be including things like oral oils as well as topical creams for chronic pain such as arthritis. What does it mean for Wheatland County? Well, starting right from the ground up, we want to be supporting local businesses, local contractors, and any businesses that are able to supply us wherever possible. We do want to create that community sense and build ourselves from the ground up with the community. Further to that, once the building is built, we'll be employing 45 local Albertans with well-paid positions and great benefits. And in speaking to some of the surrounding community members, we learned a lot that a lot of the younger generations are actually going out into the city limits, as there's far more opportunity out there for well-paid positions and jobs. Therefore, we want to retain that sense of community and hope that people will stay within the county. Further to that, we also obviously want to be one of the greatest employers here and be a great neighbor and also serve as a resource for cannabis information. So with the upcoming recreational market coming out, I know there's going to be a lot of questions and concerns. Us being on the medicinal side of things, we will be able to help answer that, as we do have a lot of that documentation. So you can lean on us for any of those questions. We'll also be supporting any kind of local drug awareness campaigns and ensuring that the youth and everyone else is properly informed on the proper use of medicinal cannabis. As far as location, as you can see on the map there, we'll be building a 60,800 square foot facility in the northwest corner of Northwest 7, 22, 26-4. And the land itself is zoned industrial general right now, which coincides with the current land use bylaw. We are 9 kilometers away from the nearest school and a 3 parcel distance away from any closest bus routes. Also in that industrial sector, we hope that foot traffic will not be an issue, and not to mention the facility itself will be completely enclosed, and you will require a security clearance key in order to even enter the parking lot itself. So very, very secure. Here's a zoomed in image of Google Maps and to scale footprint basically of the size of the facility that will be placed there, and that the black line being the perimeter of the fence. The wetlands existing, as you can see, the larger one in the middle there and one above that are the 2 primary ones we were trying to conserve. And the facility itself is going to be an indoor design. I know right now it looks a little bit like a jailed in Alcatraz, but that's not necessarily how the landscape is going to look. The warehouse itself is going to be completely discreet with no indication of what the interior operations are, no flashy signs, anything like that. However, we will be landscaping for visual optics, obviously, and create a nice serene area. On the left-hand side, you'll see just a snippet, one of the multiple pages of the wetland conservation study. The blue circles obviously outlining the existing wetlands, and the red is the historical wetlands, which are no longer there. So we will be avoiding the existing wetlands as per that study. Other studies to be commissioned include the waste management report, geotechnical, your environmental site assessments, traffic impact assessments, and water wastewater reports, and a storm management plan. We want to check all the boxes and ensure that we're not affecting any of the environment or surrounding community around us. As far as services go, we will be drilling water wells to supply our irrigation needs, and we're going to be using approximately 20 cubes of water per day. If as a contingency plan, we have spoken with Gleason Water Supply and doing some potential trucking if necessary of water. However, that's a bit of a hike all the way from Gleason. However, we would have some conversations with the Western Irrigation District as well if that's an option moving forward. As far as heating goes, us being an eco-friendly facility, we're going to be incorporating geothermal energy, so using the natural heat from the earth to heat our building. We won't be combusting any natural gas, which we are very proud of, being it that, obviously carbon emissions are a huge concern for our country right now, as well as carbon taxes. We're going to reduce our carbon footprint significantly.
That's a question, Theo, sorry.
Absolutely.
In regards to the water, is it potable water, treated water? What kind of water?
So the water itself, it is potable water at 260 feet. However, for us, we will have what's called a reverse osmosis system that will be cleaning the water, as we will require a certain level of water there. And as far as electricity goes, Fortis will be powering our electricity needs. However, we will be covering our roof in solar panels as well, which will mitigate approximately 10 to 12% of electricity usage. Further to that, we'd like to have some conversations, if possible, to possibly increase some ground-mounted solar. As sustainability being one of our core values, we do want to be as self-sufficient as possible and capture as much of that natural energy as we can. Security. So I know back in 2016 when I had just a brief presentation there, security was a concern. However, with what Health Canada has mandated for our minimum security level is called level 10 security, basically is superior than your average bank security level. As I mentioned before, the entire perimeter of the facility is completely fenced in. A secure gate will require security passcodes to get in just to the parking lot itself. Further from that, anyone working at the facility will have to go through a criminal background check as well as have these security clearance badges. Every inch of the facility is monitored by high-definition video cameras day and night by 24-hour security personnel. Therefore, we are very much a lockdown facility in Fort Knox, as we call it. There's several barriers to entry as well that are required as per Health Canada, reinforced walls, vaults, etc. One thing to note is there's no on-site sales present. Therefore, there'll be the traffic will be limited simply to the employees coming in and out on regular business hours and one delivery truck per day. So, in summary, we are, as I mentioned there, we're well on our way to getting our license to build with Health Canada under those standards with the federal government, and we would love the opportunity to grow inside of Wheatland County and grow where experience already lives. And I'm open to any questions or concerns or anything like that.
Thank you. Any questions?
Hey, thanks. Right on. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
I had a question there. So you're growing there, are you going to manufacture products as well? Like you mentioned, there's some products that you're looking at?
So simply extract oils from the same flower?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the topical balms will be through a third-party subsidiary.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. And you think you can generate enough heat through geothermal to keep that size of a building warm? Like we just had minus 40 temps.
Between through the engineers that we've been speaking with, the LED lights that we're using produce enough heat to heat the building regardless, and then the geothermal heating is just going to be an added feature basically to heat the remainder of the building.
Okay,
yeah.
Fair enough. Anybody else?
What would be your, call it tonnage of product being harvested?
Right now we're slotted for approximately 7,000 kilograms per year. So minuscule in comparison to some of the larger players in Canada right now. However, still a big impact for the medicinal industry.
Do you have any other facilities, or is this the first one?
This will be the first one.
Okay,
yeah.
fair enough.
And maybe you can answer this one, Alan. What is the proposed tax benefit going to be to us?
Can't answer the exact amount. Theo may be able to help, but it would be taxed at a non-residential rate, and I don't know the value of the property, but maybe Theo has some idea on what the valuation of the building would be.
Valuation of the building right now is approximately 18 million. So I'm not sure how the tax structure on that's going to work at the moment.
Our current tax rate's around 8.8 mils. A portion of that, obviously about 40% goes to the province for education, so I don't know, you could say 5 or 6, let's say 5 mils on 18 million.
Thank you.
Is there, I understand you've been dealing with our planning stuff. Is there, everything's looking the way it should?
Through the chair, well, we don't have an application as is.
Okay.
The only issue that will come before council is that in the area that the applicant is proposing to do this development, this type of use is not allowed at this point in time. It's only allowed in the Highway 1 WASP area, structure plan area. So that'll be a decision of council whether they want to allow this type of use outside of that approved area.
And that would be the land use bylaw that we're looking at proposing the amended change, okay? I myself would like to see all council sit for this, honestly.
We can just accept this as information.
Yeah.
And we didn't have to decide on the bylaw.
Yeah.
We'd have to have us.
At this point in time, there's no application in front of you, but that is the case. It'll be in the future. It'll come to you. And yes, it probably would be a good idea for all of council to listen to this one, because it would be a significant change for Wheatland County to have this type of use not in the designated area.
Motion.
Great presentation. I got everything I needed out of it, so I'll move this information. I'll move this as information.
All in favor?
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you. Did you have pamphlets or something you're handing out? Okay, fair enough. Okay, we'll move.
My father was so against it until he tried the bomb on his heel, and he's ex-military, and now he doesn't have to use his aspirin or Tylenol anymore, and can go for 3 hours without having any pain from his bones. So,
Thank you. So as Glenn's not going to be here for the rest of the day, I asked him if we could go through the Reeves report, and he said, yeah, it'd be fine. So we'll move on to 4.1 or 4041A. All his reports there. Got the Wheatland Regional Waterline Project.
Got a question on the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board. Glenn's is on the board. Is it possible for me to tag along if I don't charge, like, just for information for my sake? And I understand that there'd be no, and just be an observer? Thanks.
Yeah, we can certainly. That's something we could ask. Calgary has had more than 1 to 10.
Yeah, can you make that inquiry? Because I would do this on my own goodness. Okay.
We were already told that.
Okay.
Because Calgary did it. Just show up. Yeah, just show up. Say you're not going to participate. But you could ride with Glenn and I.
Right, well, that's what I mean, yeah, if you guys don't mind, in the first meeting, if I have to sit out and count cars that are going down the street, I won't go to the second one then.
But that's what's happened in the past, is that
Okay, thank you.
The thing that I have a question about is with regional water supply, is it common for the engineers to do the minutes of the meetings? Regional water supply?
they have been getting the engineers to do.
Yeah. Don't they have staff now, though they've hired somebody? So hopefully that will be the,
That would be a question.
yeah. I just think engineers are awful expensive to do that. Don't cost money.
I don't have any questions.
I have one question, sorry. I just see the timeline for the request for K Division. Do we feel like we need a meeting at the spring convention with our CMP, or would we
That's
rather
part
work
of it
locally?
as well, yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have met with the RCMP in the past. I would recommend that council meet with the RCMP, talk about the real crime matters in the county, and any other matters that council feels appropriate, and partly because they have a new division commander. Previous division commander, she has stepped down in the spring of last year, or yeah, I think it was the spring of last year. So, and we've not met with the new commander, so I think it would be worthwhile. Yeah, typically we have a motion, and then what we'll do is if there's any things we want to talk about, I think rural crime is one of the things you want to talk about for sure. If there's any other things, we usually let them know so they can be prepared. So if there's anything specific, just email that to myself. And I can make sure that that's on the list. Okay?
Okay.
I'll move that we set up a meeting with the RCMP when we're up in Edmonton for the spring AAMDC convention. And rural crime is the main talking point.
Okay, motion on the floor. All in favor? Motion carried. We also have to have a motion to accept.
I move that we accept Reeve Kester's as report as information.
All in favor? Carried.
I think the other thing, Mr. Chairman, would be if council wants to consider a meeting with Alberta Transportation and perhaps a meeting or an opportunity to meet with the Minister of Environment. We can put in the requests. Typically, again, they like to know what we want to talk about. We haven't had much success with environment in the past. We met with them 3 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago, with 4 other municipalities in the room. So didn't give us much opportunity, but we certainly can make those requests if council sees that appropriate, Mr.
Would
Chairman.
that be something that we could, in regards to the environment, if we could approach Nihil County and see if they want to do it at the same time? One issue? I would make a motion to have a meeting with the Minister of Environment, RE compost facilities within Alberta, and issues forthcoming, and work with Nihil County on that as well. So, I was just gonna make the environment, and do we want to add AT&U as well? Alberta Transportation?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest to do it as a separate
Motion?
discussion.
Okay, that's what I was saying.
So you're talking about compost facilities being a concern. I think one of the other things is our wastewater management. And the approvals time, which we've talked to them in the past about, so.
And also, should we add wetlands in there too?
Yes.
Road construction wetlands?
You got to get them on one of them.
Yeah. Because I know Neho County has that same issue as well. Yeah. Yeah. Is that appropriate? Okay.
Chairman, we can make the request. I won't promise anything, but we'll make the request.
Never hurts to try. So, I put a motion, all in favor of the motion? Carried. So also suggest that we have a meeting with Alberta Transportation about, at the same time, some of our recent.
So,
high
Mr. Chairman, I
accident
think
areas.
one of the things that could be discussed there is the situation with 842 and the roads that we were wanting to take over, where they're at with that. Just an update on that.
And also possibly some of our higher collision areas. Different kind of things. Go ahead.
I move that we set up, I move that we set up a meeting with the Alberta Transportation about the update for the roads that we want to take over and the high collision intersections and areas of our roads.
Okay, motion's on the floor by Jason. All in favor? Carried.
Mr. Chairman, I just also wanted to mention that I did forward the email that I received just at 1 o'clock from Regional Transportation Director Darren Davidson about the investigation of one of the intersections in Wheatland County, 840 and 564. Some of the things they're undertaking. So there's some information that's been provided to council on that.
Thank you. Yes. Does council want to go on camera and finish these ones up? Okay. Motion to go into camera. We gotta get some.
I'll move to that we go in camera.
Okay, Jason moves that we go on camera. All in favor? We'll go on camera.